Dr. Elena Vasquez had always loved the silence of space. Working alone on the research station orbiting Kepler 440b, she spent her days digging through ancient ruins and cataloging mysterious artifacts. The nearest human settlement was 3 months away by spaceship. Most people would call it lonely, but Elena called it perfect. She was having her morning coffee when the first ship appeared. At first, it looked like a distant star growing brighter. Elena adjusted her telescope and felt her heart skip. The object was massive, easily the size of a small moon, and it was moving. Its surface gleamed like polished crystal, reflecting the light of nearby stars in patterns that hurt to look at. Directly, Elena rushed to her communication console and sent an urgent message to Earth. Unknown vessel detected in Kepler system. Size approximately 15 kilometers. Design unlike anything in human records, requesting immediate contact with Space Command. The response came back 12 hours later. Earth was celebrating. Similar ships had appeared over every major city on the planet. Humanity had finally made contact with an alien civilization. The news networks were calling it the greatest day in human history. Elena watched the broadcast with growing unease. The beings that emerged from the crystal ships were beautiful in a way that made her skin crawl. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with pale skin that seemed to glow from within. Their faces were perfect, like classical sculptures given life, but their eyes held no warmth. When they spoke, their voices echoed inside people's heads without passing through their ears. The aliens called themselves the Hegemony. They claimed to represent a galactic empire spanning thousands of worlds and millions of years. They had come to welcome humanity into their great civilization, but their welcome came with conditions. Within hours of their arrival, every nuclear weapon on Earth simply stopped working. Military satellites went dark. Even the most advanced fighter jets fell from the sky like stones. The hegemony had neutralized every weapon humanity possessed without firing a single shot. The alien leader, standing before the United Nations, spoke with quiet authority. Your species shows promise, but you are violent and unpredictable. For the safety of the galaxy, you must be integrated into our empire. This is not a negotiation. This is a necessity. Elena watched in horror as world leaders one by one bowed, their heads in submission. The President of Earth Federation, the Prime Minister of the European Alliance, the Chancellor of the Asian Republic. All of them accepted the aliens' terms without question. They had seen the demonstration of power and understood that resistance was impossible. The hegemony's plan was simple and terrifying. They would establish integration centers in every major city. Every human would report to these centers for a procedure they called neural harmonization. It would remove humanity's aggressive tendencies and make them peaceful, productive members of galactic society. In other words, they were going to lobotomize the entire human race. The first integration centers opened within a week. Millions of people lined up peacefully, their faces blank with acceptance. The processed humans who emerged seemed happy enough, but something essential was missing from their eyes. They moved like sleepwalkers, following instructions without question or complaint. Elena's hands shook as she watched the feeds from Earth. Her younger brother David had already been processed. In their last video call, he smiled at her with empty eyes and assured her that integration was wonderful. You'll understand when you get here. Elena, the fear just goes away. Everything becomes so simple. That night, Elena received her orders. A hegemony transport would arrive at her station in 3 days to collect her for processing. She was to prepare all research materials for transfer to the new galactic authority. Elena stared at the message for a long time. Around her, the ancient ruins she had spent years studying seemed to whisper warnings in languages long forgotten. These artifacts belonged to a civilization that had thrived millions of years ago, creating wonders that humanity was only beginning to understand. She thought about her grandfather, who had told her stories about the old wars on Earth, about people who had faced impossible odds and chose to fight anyway, not because they could win, but because some things were worth dying for. Elena made her decision. She began working frantically, studying the alien artifacts with new urgency. The ruins contained technology beyond human understanding, but desperation made her bold. She rigged crude weapons for mining equipment and archaeological tools. She set traps throughout the station using power cells and excavation charges. When the hegemony transport arrived, Elena was ready. The alien enforcers who boarded her station expected to find a compliant human, waiting for collection. Instead, they found a woman with wild eyes and improvised weapons, who absolutely refused to surrender. The fight was brief but decisive. Elena's makeshift explosive destroyed the transport and killed the enforcement team. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had drawn alien blood. Standing in the wreckage of her research station, surrounded by the bodies of her would-be captors, Elena activated her communication array. Her message went out across the galaxy, carried by quantum transmitters to every human settlement, every hidden rebel cell, every person who still remembered what freedom felt like. My name is Elena Vasquez. I am human. I was born free, and I will die free. They can take our world, but they cannot take our souls unless we give them away. I have just killed 6 aliens who came to steal my mind. If a lone archaeologist on a forgotten research station can do this, what can we accomplish if we stand together? The message spread like wildfire through human space. On Earth, in the outer colonies, on research stations, and mining platforms, scattered across dozens of star systems, people began to remember something the hegemony thought they had crushed. They remembered that submission was a choice, not an inevitability. Elena's refusal became a spark in the darkness, across human civilization. That spark began to catch fire. The galaxy would never be the same. Elena's message traveled faster than she had ever imagined possible. Within hours, encrypted responses began flooding her communication array from across human space. Most were just a few words, but they all carried the same desperate hope. We heard you. We're still here. What do we do now? The first to respond was Captain Torres from the mining station Cygnus 7. His voice crackled through the static, heavy with emotion. Dr. Vasquez, they came for my crew yesterday. Took 40 good people for processing, but 12 of us hidden. The deep shafts. We've been waiting for someone to tell us it was okay to fight back. Next came Dr. Chen from the agricultural colony on Proxima B. Elena, the integration centers here are running day and night. My neighbors, my friends, they all walk around like ghosts now. But there are still some of us in the mountains, in the forests. We've been afraid to act. But your message, it changes everything. Elena felt a mix of pride and terror. She had wanted to inspire resistance, but she hadn't fully grasped what that meant. These people were looking to her for leadership, for a plan she didn't have. All she knew was that she refused to give up, and somehow that had to be enough. The hegemony's response came within a week. Elena's sensors detected 3 massive warships approaching her position. These weren't simple transport vessels like the one she had destroyed. These were true battleships, each one capable of turning her research station into cosmic dust. But Elena had spent that week studying the alien artifacts with desperate intensity. The ruins on Kepler 442b belonged to a species called the Architects, and their technology operated on principles that human science barely understood. She had managed to activate some kind of defensive system, though she wasn't entirely sure how it worked. When the hegemony ships opened fire, something incredible happened. The ancient machines buried in the planet's surface came alive, projecting a shimmering barrier around Elena's station. The alien weapons, powerful enough to crack a moon, splashed harmlessly against the shield. Elena laughed with wild relief, then immediately got back to work. If the Architects had defensive technology, maybe they had weapons too. The standoff lasted 3 days. The hegemony ships hammered at the shield, while Elena frantically studied every artifact she could find. Finally, she discovered something that looked promising, a crystalline device that hummed with contained energy. She had no idea what it would do, but desperate times called for desperate measures. When Elena activated the device, a beam of pure light lanced out from the planet's surface. It struck the lead hegemony warship and simply erased it from existence. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving only empty space and scattered debris. The other 2 ships retreated immediately. Elena's second victory sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Her message this time was different, more confident. "This is Elena Vasquez again. I just want the hegemony to know something important. We found their weapons, and we're learning how to use them. To every human listening, you are not helpless. You are not defeated. We have allies they never told us about." The response was immediate and overwhelming. On Earth, a group of former military officers calling themselves the Unbroken began coordinating resistance cells. On Mars, colonists started sabotaging integration centers. In the asteroid belt, miners turned their equipment into improvised weapons. But it was Elena's third message that truly changed everything. She had been studying the alien ruins for weeks when she made an incredible discovery. The architects hadn't just left behind technology, they had left behind a message, encoded in quantum crystals and waiting for someone desperate enough to decode it. The message was a warning and a gift. The architects had faced the hegemony millions of years ago. They had lost their war, but they had hidden weapons and knowledge across the galaxy, hoping that someday another species would need them. Elena's voice shook as she broadcast this revelation to humanity. "We are not the first to fight them. The architects left us tools, weapons, knowledge. But more than that, they left us proof that the hegemony can be beaten. They're not gods. They're not invincible. They're just another species that happens to be very good at making others afraid." This message reached beyond human space. Other species within the hegemony's empire began to remember what they had lost. On a dozen worlds, beings who had lived under alien rule for generations started to whisper about the humans, who refused to kneel. The hegemony found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a resistance that grew stronger. With each attempt to crush it, every show of force only created more rebels. Every integration center that burned down became a symbol of hope. Elena, working alone on her research station with ancient alien technology, had become something she never intended to be. She was no longer just a scientist studying old ruins. She was the voice of human defiance, the proof that the impossible was possible. As she prepared for the battles ahead, Eleanor remembered her grandfather's words about courage. "It's not about being fearless," he had told her. "It's about being so afraid you can barely breathe and doing what's right anyway." Eleanor was terrified, but she was no longer alone. Across the galaxy, humans were remembering how to fight, and for the first time since the hegemony arrived, the future felt uncertain. That uncertainty was the beginning of hope. 3 months after Elena's first message, the resistance had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. What started as scattered groups of survivors had become a network spanning dozens of star systems, but with growth came new challenges. That kept Elena awake at night. The hegemony had stopped trying to capture humans for processing. Instead, they had begun systematic elimination of resistance cells. Entire colonies were being wiped out overnight. The aliens had decided that if they couldn't control humanity, they would simply remove the problem. Elena stared at the latest reports streaming across her screen. The agricultural world of New Montana had gone silent. Beacon Station in the Vega system had stopped transmitting. 3 mining operations in the belt had been reduced to debris fields. Thousands of people were dead, and it was her fault for giving them hope. Her hands trembled as she reached for the communication controls, then stopped. She couldn't break down now. Too many people were counting on her to stay strong. The quantum communicator chimed with an incoming message. Commander Rodriguez from the battle cruiser Defiance appeared on her screen, his withered face grim but determined. "Elena, we need to talk. I've got news that changes everything." Rodriguez had been one of Earth's finest military officers before the invasion. He had refused integration and escaped with his ship and crew, becoming one of the Resistance's most effective leaders. If anyone could lift Elena's spirits, it was him. "What have you found?" Elena asked. "Remember those quantum signatures you detected in the architect ruins? We've been following similar patterns across the galaxy, Elena. There are architect sites everywhere, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. And they're all starting to wake up." Elena felt her heart race. For weeks, She had been teaching other resistance cells how to activate the ancient technology. But progress had been slow. Most humans lacked the specialized knowledge to safely interface with systems millions of years old. But there's more, Rodriguez continued. We're not alone in this fight. 3 days ago, we made contact with a Zephyrian ship. Do you know what that means? Elena's breath caught. The Zephyrians had been integrated into the hegemony nearly 1,000 years ago. They were one of the Empire's most trusted species, serving as administrators and technicians throughout alien space. They want to help us. Elena asked, Help us, Elena. They want to join us. It turns out that integration doesn't work as well as the hegemony claims. The Zephyrians have been pretending to be loyal while secretly maintaining their own culture, their own dreams of freedom. Your broadcasts have been spreading through their networks too. This was the breakthrough Elena had hoped for but never dared expect. If other alien species were willing to rebel, the resistance could access technology, resources, and knowledge that humans couldn't obtain alone. Over the following weeks, the secret alliance grew. The Zephyrians provided crucial intelligence about hegemony operations. A species called the Corthans, who had maintained hidden enclaves for centuries, began sharing their weapons technology. Even some individual members of more recently integrated species started making contact, offering what help they could. Elena found herself at the center of something unprecedented in galactic history, a multi-species rebellion against the hegemony's rule. But with this opportunity came enormous responsibility. She was no longer just fighting for humanity's freedom. She was fighting for the freedom of countless species across the galaxy, many of whom had been enslaved for longer than human civilization had existed. The weight of it should have crushed her, but instead, Elena felt energized. She threw herself into studying architect technology with renewed purpose, making breakthrough after breakthrough. The ancient ruins weren't just weapons caches. She realized they were schools left behind to teach future generations how to resist tyranny. The architects had faced the same choice humanity faced now: submit or fight. They had chosen to fight, and though they had lost their war, they had planted the seeds of future victory in hidden sites across the galaxy. Elena's most important discovery came when she found the central archive deep beneath Kepler 442b's surface. The quantum crystals contained not just weapons designs, but strategic information about the hegemony's weaknesses. The aliens weren't as united as they appeared. Their empire was held together by fear and careful manipulation of subject species. If that control could be disrupted, if enough species rebelled simultaneously, the entire system could collapse. But the archive also contained a warning that chilled Elena to the bone. The hegemony had contingency plans for large-scale rebellion. If they couldn't maintain control through fear, they would resort to something called the Final Protocol, the complete sterilization of rebellious sectors. Elena shared this intelligence with the growing resistance network. Rather than discouraging them, the knowledge seemed to strengthen their resolve. Commander Rodriguez put it best during one of their strategy meetings. So they'll try to kill us all if we fight back? They're already trying to kill us all for fighting back. At least this way, we go down swinging. The resistance began planning something that had never been attempted before: a coordinated strike against hegemony installations across multiple star systems. It would be humanity's way of announcing to the galaxy that the age of submission was over. Elena knew the risks. Success might save countless species from slavery, but failure would mean the extinction of every world that had dared to hope for freedom. The weight of that decision should have paralyzed her with doubt. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced since the invasion began: genuine hope. Standing in the architect ruins, surrounded by technology created by beings who had faced the same impossible choice, Elena made her decision. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. Elena stared at the holographic display showing the hegemony's massive fleet gathering near Earth. 1,200 warships, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. The aliens had finally lost their patience with humanity's stubborn refusal to submit. The message from the hegemony high command was brutally simple: the human species will serve as an example to all who would challenge galactic order. Earth will be rendered uninhabitable. All human colonies will be sterilized. The age of defiance ends now. Elena's hand shook as she forwarded the message to resistance cells across the galaxy. This was exactly what the Architect Archives had warned about. The final protocol wasn't just a threat anymore. It was happening. Commander Rodriguez appeared on her screen, his face grim but determined. Elena, we're out of time. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Our Zephyrian contacts say the fleet will reach Earth in 72 hours. What's our status? Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. We've got 47 ships ready for action, mix of human vessels and alien defectors, against 1,200 hegemony warships. It's not much of a fight. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. Her refusal to submit had inspired a galaxy-wide rebellion, but it had also doomed her species to extinction, unless she could find a miracle in the next 3 days. That's when Dr. Patel from the research station Galileo contacted her with impossible news. Elena, you need to see this. We've been studying the quantum resonance patterns from your Architect site, and we've detected something incredible. There's a massive structure hidden in the Veil Nebula. It's been cloaked for millions of years, but it's starting to power up. The structure Dr. Patel had found was beyond anything humanity had imagined. A space station the size of a small moon, built by the architects as their final gift to future generations. It contained weapons that could match anything the hegemony possessed, but more importantly, it contained the key to their ultimate weakness. Elena studied the data with growing excitement. The hegemony's power didn't just come from their ships and weapons. It came from a network of control nodes that maintained their empire's communication and coordination systems. If those nodes could be disrupted simultaneously, their massive fleet would become a collection of isolated ships, unable to work together effectively. But accessing the Architect station would require something unprecedented, a direct assault on the most heavily defended position in hegemony space. The station was located near their capital world, protected by automated defense systems that had never been breached. Even if the resistance could somehow reach it, they would need someone to interface with technology that was millions of years old and completely alien. Elena realized with growing clarity that she was the only person who could do it. She had spent months learning to communicate with Architect systems. She understood their quantum-based technology better than anyone alive. I have to go there myself, she told Rodriguez during their final planning session. Elena, that's a suicide mission. Even if we can get you to the station, the chances of getting you out alive are practically zero. Then don't worry about getting me out, Elena replied. Just make sure this works. The plan was insane by any reasonable standard. While the main hegemony fleet was focused on destroying Earth, a small strike force would attempt to penetrate their core territory and activate the Architect superweapon. Elena would personally interface with the ancient systems, while the resistance fleet held off any defenders. Success would cripple the hegemony's ability to coordinate their empire. Failure would mean the end of everything. Elena recorded her final message to humanity and their alien allies on the eve of the mission. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the fear she was trying to hide. By the time you hear this, our fate will already be decided. I want everyone to know that this started because I was too stubborn to accept slavery. It's ending because all of you were too brave to accept defeat. Whatever happens tomorrow, we proved that freedom is worth fighting for. The journey to the Veil Nebula took 18 hours at maximum. Warp. Elena spent the time studying every piece of Architect technology she could access, preparing for the most important exam of her life. If she made a single mistake while interfacing with their systems, billions of people would die. When they finally reached the hidden station, Elena felt her breath catch. The structure was beautiful and terrifying, covered in crystalline growths that pulsed with inner light. It had been waiting in the darkness for millions of years, but somehow it felt alive. The resistance fleet engaged the hegemony defenders, while Elena's shuttle approached the station's docking bay. Explosions lit up space around them as friends, and enemies died in the void. Elena forced herself to focus on the mission. She had one chance to save not just humanity, but every species that dreamed of freedom. As her shuttle touched down inside the ancient station, she whispered a prayer to whatever gods might be listening. The fate of the galaxy now rested in the hands of an archaeologist who had simply refused to kneel. Elena stepped into the architect station, ready to face whatever waited in the darkness. Elena stepped into the architect station and immediately felt the weight of millions of years pressing down on her. The corridors were vast and empty, but somehow she knew she wasn't alone. The station was alive in ways she couldn't understand, watching her, judging whether she was worthy of the power it contained. Emergency lights flickered behind her as explosions from the space battle outside shook the ancient structure. Commander Rodriguez's voice crackled through her communicator. Elena, we can't hold them much longer. Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it fast. Elena ran through the crystalline corridors, following quantum signatures that pulled at her mind like a compass needle. She had studied architect technology for months, but this station was beyond anything she had encountered. Every surface hummed with power that could reshape reality itself. She found the central chamber deep in the station's heart. It was a sphere the size of a cathedral, its walls covered in flowing symbols that shifted and changed as she watched. At the center stood a pillar of pure light, waiting for someone brave enough to touch it. Elena approached slowly, her heart pounding. The architect archives had been clear about what would happen next to activate the stations. Weapons, she would need to merge her consciousness with the ancient systems. There was no guarantee she would survive the process. Behind her, the sound of battle grew closer. Hegemony forces had breached the station's outer defenses. She could hear their heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors. Elena placed her hands on the pillar of light and felt the universe explode around her. Suddenly she was everywhere at once. Her consciousness expanded across the galaxy, touching every hegemony control node, every communication relay, every automated system that held their empire together. She could see it all, the massive fleet preparing to destroy Earth, the enslaved, populations on 1,000 worlds, the fear that kept entire species in chains. But she could also see something the hegemony had missed. Their control network had a fatal flaw. It was designed by beings who believed submission was natural, who couldn't imagine that their subjects might willingly choose death over slavery. They had never prepared for someone like Elena. With a thought, she began the cascade. Control nodes across the galaxy started failing in sequence. On hegemony worlds, the neural inhibitors that kept enslaved populations docile suddenly stopped working. For the first time in centuries, beings who had forgotten what freedom felt like began to remember. On the Zephyrian homeworld, citizens looked around in confusion as the compulsions that had controlled their thoughts for 1,000 years simply vanished. On the mining worlds of the Kortha system, workers dropped their tools and stared at the sky with wonder. Across them, empire, species that had been slaves for generations began to understand that their chains had been invisible. All along, Elena felt their awakening like waves of joy crashing over her expanded consciousness. But she also felt the price. The process was burning out her nervous system. She could feel her physical body shutting down as her mind stretched across impossible distances. Through the station's sensors, she watched the hegemony fleet near Earth suddenly lose coordination. Ships that had moved in perfect formation moments before now drifted aimlessly. As their communication systems failed, the massive invasion force had become a collection of isolated vessels. Confused and vulnerable. Commander Rodriguez's fleet seized the opportunity. Human ships and their alien allies struck at the disabled hegemony vessels with everything they had. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens were on the defensive. But the real victory was happening across the galaxy, on world after world. Newly awakened populations were rising against their oppressors. The hegemony's local garrisons, cut off from central command, found themselves facing enemies they had never imagined, their own former slaves. Elena tried to speak, to coordinate the rebellion, but she could no longer control her physical voice. Her body was failing, but her mind remained connected to the galactic network. Through quantum communications, she sent a final message to every free being in the galaxy. This is Elena Vasquez. The chains are broken, but freedom is not free. You must choose it, fight for it, protect it. I showed you that one person could. Say no to tyranny. Now you must show the galaxy what billions of free people can accomplish together. Across human space, her words sparked celebrations and tears on Earth. Crowds gathered in the streets as the hegemony fleet retreated in confusion. In the outer colonies, resistance fighters emerged from hiding to find that their impossible dream had become reality. But Elena's message reached far beyond humanity. On the Zephyrian homeworld, newly freed citizens began dismantling the integration centers that had processed their children for generations. Cohorts of miners turned their equipment into weapons and drove their overseers from the tunnels. Ancient species that had submitted to the hegemony millions of years ago suddenly remembered what it meant to stand tall. The galaxy was burning, but it was the fire of freedom, not destruction. Elena felt her consciousness beginning to fade as her physical form finally gave out. But in her last moments, she could see the future spreading out before the galaxy like a sunrise after endless night. The hegemony's empire was collapsing as world after world declared independence. Their fleets were scattered and leaderless. Their control network lay in ruins. Most importantly, beings across the galaxy had learned the lesson Elena had tried to teach, that submission was always a choice, and that choice could be changed. With her final breath, Elena smiled. She had been just one person who refused to kneel. But sometimes, one person is all it takes to light a fire that burns across the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what Elena had always hoped for.